Welcome to the And I Quote podcast. I'm Ashley, one of the co hosts of the podcast, and I'm really excited just to talk to our audience today. It's October, Cybersecurity Month. So, really, like on theme about that, I'm excited to talk about cyber insurance, cybersecurity, and why that's important for small businesses. Our guest today is Eder Ribeiro, who's the Director of Global Incident Response at TransUnion.
Thanks, Ashley. Appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here and spend time with you in the audience.
If you want to start with just giving our audience just a little bit of background on you.
I'll try to keep it brief. So I come with varied backgrounds from business management, military, been in the military for about 19 years now. I have a legal background and I came to cyber around that same time as well. I've always been into computers and cyber. A lot was self-taught before I got a little more serious educationally wise, a decade and change ago. So I actually started in a smaller identity management company called Cyberscout, which was then in 2021 acquired by TransUnion. And at Cyberscout, I actually started there as an intern when I was in law school and doing a master's in cyber at that same time. And I founded what became our incident response forensics team there, and then grew it and scaled it out over the years, and have been working through that ever since. And then, of course, just evolved with the times and with the team. And now I have responsibility over different parts of the incident response business that isn't just the forensics or the digital forensics incident response component. But that's me in a nutshell. It's just been, a lot of hard work, sacrifice, and putting at it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. So, really thinking through, the solution that Coterie and TransUnion have partnered on is targeted towards small business owners. So, thinking about that audience, a lot of small business owners they sometimes think that they're too small to be targeted by cyber criminals. Why do you think that's a misconception and probably a dangerous misconception? I'll say.
It's incredibly dangerous. I agree with you there. And it's the myth. If there is one myth that is like the myth in micro SMB, that's it right there. It's the I'm too small to be hit, and I hear it every day. I've been fighting this myth for a decade plus since I started at Cyber Scout and since, we've grown and scaled out under the TransUnion family. And it's very pervasive and it's such a false blanket of security because the reality is really the opposite. You're a bigger target by cyber criminals by being small because more likely than not, you have less security than the enterprise client. And people just think, oh, well, I'm a small business. What do you have to gain from me? No, not every criminal group needs the Ocean's 11. Let's plan for the year and bring all these teams of
Sure.
experts. We can make the big payout that we're going to retire from. Most cyber criminal groups are small groups and they operate as businesses. So just like your business and my business and every business out there, you want scalability, which requires volume,
Yeah.
right? And if you need
Uh-huh.
volume, that requires processes, that requires kind of sometimes quick ROI. And cyber criminals are no different. You look at ransomware gangs, a perfect example. Ransomware groups are usually a big group and then you have what we call affiliates, which are almost think of it as a franchise franchisee relationship. And these
Okay.
are smaller groups. And the ones who are hitting your businesses are these affiliate ships who buy into the Lockbit, who buy into the Alpha V or whatever software group that, ransomware group they're getting into. And they're getting software, they're getting support, they're getting how to's similar to a franchise in a way. And so these folks, they're 5, 6 people, they're the ones who are trying to make a paycheck from that micro small business. It's not just the mega sized, company out
Okay.
there. And if you're a small business with certain resources and you got to put bread on the table and you decided that the way you're going to do that is by being a cyber criminal, then you need cash flow.
Yeah.
And if you need cash flow, do you put all your ducks in that one basket of trying to break into some large entity, or do you make sure you have money coming in by hitting a softer target? It makes you feel safe, makes you feel safer to think I'm small potatoes, no one's coming after me. But in fact is you're a business connected to the internet,
Yep.
you are at risk.
Okay. Yep, 100%. So I think you definitely cleared up that myth, but thinking through like some of the things that you talked through about like attackers in the cyberspace, like what's the most common ways that they gain access to systems and platforms that small business owners use?
You, me. Humans, something from our internal numbers, about 76% of our claims that we support, the attack is initiated through a human element, through the social
Uh-huh.
engineering type element. One way or another, they try to scam folks into doing the wrong thing, for lack of better terms, right? Not sticking to the proper cyber hygiene, not sticking to the training. And that's how they penetrate. That's how they break into the environment. But if you look at the majority of small businesses that are having cyber incidents, whether it's especially if you blend them, if you
Mhm.
blend the ransomware and the cyber extortion and the
Yeah.
business email compromise and all of that stuff in together, you find that when you look at the forensic findings, the evidence shows you somebody did something. They clicked on a link, they downloaded something with a macro enabled, they did something that then led to that initial penetration. And that's when it starts to become game over because it's a softer target with less sophisticated defensive apparatus in place. That's one of those interesting things about cybercrime, right? They're not pickpocketers. They're not just guys with slick hands. They're engineers. They're cloud architects.
Mhm. Well, it's definitely very sobering to think about it that way, that there, it's definitely a level of sophistication and smart individuals, right, that are executing these type of crimes. So definitely something that, small businesses should be aware of. So can you share any examples or stats around how small business cyber incidents really can be devastating and just the sheer impact that they can have on small businesses?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we do see it. Not everyone comes out unscathed. This year alone, we've had a couple clients who unfortunately made the decision that they closed down the doors because of an incident, especially if you're in niche markets. And by niche markets, I'm talking about professional services or markets where you have sensitive information. Just because you're a small business, it doesn't mean that the data you process or host or, manipulate is not sensitive in nature. So, for example, we had a business earlier this year that fell prey to a ransomware attack, and it was a staffing agency. It was a small staffing agency, and they've been in business for about 30 years. Real mom and pop. The owner was looking to retire, maybe sell the business and make a couple extra bucks before retirement or something of that sort. And they just weren't ready. They weren't ready. They didn't have the coverage position to support them. They didn't have the hygiene in place, and they were completely encrypted. Their backups were encrypted. They were in a tough position. And by the time they overcame, went through the investigative phases, went through all the normal IR phases and responses, had to notify tens of thousands of people
Uh,
because they're literally in the business of taking in resumes and plugging people to other jobs. So they're processing W-2s, W-4s, they're processing that kind of paperwork all the time. And so you're getting just tons of PII data being shared with that small business. And again, oh, we're too small to be. That was part of the thing that I heard it from the owner. Oh, I never thought this would be a thing. I'm just a small little staffing
mhm,
agency. And by the time they went through it all, he said, I thought I'd be in business for another 5, maybe 8 years. But at this point, with the amount of money I had to shell out, it doesn't even make sense to close down the doors. And that's really sad, and that stuff unfortunately happens. So we do see it. Is it the majority of the time? No, I don't think the majority of, claims, not even close. It's a small minority of small businesses or micro businesses that suffer a cyber incident that end up having to close shop. But it can happen. It can happen. And I think if anything, it should be kind of a takeaway to folks to just be introspective for a second.
mhm,
I'm not saying let the fear of a cyber incident rule your life. I can stick to some basic principles that can truly help you overcome an incident. Um, and know that the majority of the time it's going to be all right. But also know you have to take this serious. And that's the thing. Have to take this serious. If you are a business who makes money, even if you're not profitable, but if you earn revenue and you're connected to the internet, you can be targeted by a cyber criminal. And therefore you should take it seriously because if you don't and something happens, you're going to wish that you did.
target, yeah. Definitely. I think those are all like really key points that you touched on, and kind of a nice transition to think about, in that support that small businesses have. One that obviously on the coterie side, we recommend is an agent and broker. So thinking about, for if an agent wants to be that, point of expertise for their client, their small business client on the cybercrime world, what are some of the things that maybe are emerging trends or things that agents should have on their radar to recommend to their small business clients?
Well, I'm going to repeat myself, but I
That's
think
good.
that, it's consistent for a reason.
Hmm.
Get
Yep.
serious about cyber, and get real about
Yes.
cyber. So if you're an agent and a broker, I invite you to have a conversation with your prospect, right?
Hmm.
Or your active book. What are you doing? What's going on? What's new? How are you guys managing data? How are you guys handling data? What does business interruption look like to you, and how impactful is that to your ability to operate in a week, in a month? But also, if things stop for a week or two, what does that do to you for the next
Yeah.
quarter, for the rest of the year? Because depending on the business, might be no big deal, but
Yeah.
some others, it can be arguably catastrophic. So have those conversations, engage in a little bit of brainstorming with those prospects and with the folks in your book. And that way you can actually help them understand a huge part. I truly believe that, like, if you're micro to small business and you don't have cyber insurance, whew, talk about
Yeah.
not taking it serious. If you're a micro small business, you're likely not making the revenue stream to be able to pay for the expert level support that you're going to need without the help
Hmm.
of insurance. So that's kind of number one, right? So if you're a
Right.
broker agent, the first thing you should probably be talking about is, are you underinsured?
Hmm.
Right? Agents and brokers are in a unique position to help their clients because they can have those conversations, help them understand their risk a little bit more, and then actually help them understand how much coverage do I actually need if something happens. That would go so far for so
Yep.
many businesses.
Yeah. 100%. And then thinking a little bit about compliance too, like, are you starting to see regulators focus a little bit more on small businesses when it comes to cybersecurity compliance? What does that landscape look like?
In some ways, I would say generally not so much, right? In a very general sense. However, the moment you start drilling down from that, then it changes drastically, even, right? It can be geographically, right? More and more states have adopted new privacy acts that are more analogous to the CCPA, which was fairly analogous to the GDPR. So now you have uh, over 19 states or something like that now that have pretty robust compliance requirements. A small business doesn't mean you have a 50-person client base. It's very easy for a small business to have 1,000, 1,500. And about any state that has a more robust privacy act tends to draw the line well under 1,000, to which
Hmm.
means you're now within that regulatory scheme. And
Yeah.
that can bring a lot of scrutiny by an attorney general's office or another regulator body. And that's just at the state level.
Yeah.
Because it's more about consumer protection. So it's not,
Right.
so therefore it's more about how many people's information do you have? And then if you
Yes.
meet this level of risk, now you're going to have to do something about this. But right now it's certainly a little bit more carved out for
Sure.
niche type of businesses, and then how much client information it is that you're
Yeah.
taking in.
That
But
makes
it's
sense.
coming. It's
Yeah.
coming.
No, yeah, that it makes a ton of sense. But again, to your earlier point, and that's part of the conversation that, agents and brokers should be having with their clients, right? Once they kind of understand those state regulations and what the business is doing and how much data and how many customers, all of that really ties into them providing the best recommendation on cyber insurance. Just to transition a little bit to talk about the relationship between Coterie and TransUnion with the cyber product, really just partnered to make cyber insurance more accessible for small businesses. So, can you kind of walk us through what that looks like in practice?
Yeah, no, absolutely. First of all, I love you guys' approach to it, and the kind of like immediate underwriting, the like immediate quote. I think that's
Thank you.
fantastic. Small businesses, micro small businesses are busy, right? These people are
Hmm.
doing what they love doing, which is why they broke out of the model to start their own thing. So making it easier for them is awesome. So I commend you for that.
Thank you.
So I think that that's a big part right off the bit,
Hmm.
right? Is making it easy to get covered. It's making it easy to start taking the steps in the right direction. And then it's taking advantage of it, right? It's understanding what your policy has, understanding what coverage you have, and whether there's an ability to talk to experts and gain information proactively, or what happens, how does the coverage support you when that event happens. So I think all those things are pretty key to it. Taking the time, I get it, you're busy, you're doing the thing that you created, but some things are worth time,
Sure.
right? So at
Yep.
least summarizing, or maybe getting from your broker, or your agent partner, and I say partner for a reason. Look at
Hmm.
them as a partner. Look at them as somebody that you should check in with once a year or twice a year. Hey, how's everything looking? What are you seeing? Those folks may have, knowledge of what's going on the front lines that you as a small business owner might not have. And they may be able to also give you further information. Hey, your policy has X dollars for first party extortion. This means that, if you suffer, say, a ransomware event, and this is what it looks like, right? People think ransomware looks like, I don't know, guy with the hoodie,
Sure.
but really, what does ransomware look like to a small
Yeah.
business? It looks like you show up Monday morning and none of your stuff works.
Yeah.
That's what it looks. It looks like you double click on everything and nothing opens. And maybe eventually you see a random file that says readme and you click on that and you see a ransom note.
Yeah.
But that's what it actually looks like, right? Like when you talk to the folks when they call the claim in, they're not saying, "Oh my God, I have ransomware." They don't know any better. They're
Right.
CPA or baker or whatever.
Hmm.
Like, what they know is I turn my stuff on
It's not
and
working.
nothing works.
Yeah.
And so having an idea, okay, well, if nothing works, do I have coverage for this?
Hmm.
Even knowing certain things can help you, as basic as what's, what's my deductible?
Yeah.
All these
Yeah.
things, right? Because that
Mhm.
incident response plan, every business should have an incident response plan, even if you're a micro SMB. But if you're a micro business, your incident response plan is obviously going to be less robust than
Right.
enterprise,
Sure.
as it should, right? Like your business is less complex than an enterprise. But those are things that should probably be in your incident response plan, right?
Yeah.
Kept in your drawer. Hey, if I have a cyber incident, this is what I owe my carrier. This is when this the folks on their panel. This is what I expect to get support from. I know I have coverage if I have a ransomware situation or if there's a fraudulent funds transfer. These are things that happen to businesses every day
Yeah.
that would be immensely helpful, not only in efficiency of going through an incident, but just managing yourself, right? Because one of the things we see across the board is that when we are working these events with these small folks, unfortunately, one of the things that we hear all the time is this is the worst thing that's ever happened to them in their
Oh,
professional careers.
it's
And in
devastating.
that moment, you're stressed out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like
Hmm.
I get it. Like you're on the
Yeah.
fire.
Hmm.
You should be stressed out. Like, you're stressed.
Hmm.
So some preparation can relieve so much of that stress. So understanding what you paid for, understanding what you're paying for, I think is huge. And if small businesses can be a little bit more knowledgeable of what their coverages are and how it responds to just kind of classic threats. If you're connected to the internet and you make revenue, that could be you. That's a type of incident that can, you know, hit you.
There's unfortunately a lot more to lose with that potentially being their entire livelihood, right? With a micro, really small business. So I think definitely like really important points that you've driven home. And so really thinking about, just beyond the financial protection, with a typical cyber policy. And I know obviously there's so many ins and outs, but what does that, typical coverage, what does that look like for a cyber policy?
Sure. I mean, I would say for most commercial policies nowadays, you're going to see some level of coverage for first party losses that have to do with cyber extortion.
Hmm.
And so that's going to be anything from ransomware, which is extortion plus encryption, kind of an easy way of thinking about it, or just straight up extortion, right? Somebody, so one way or another, got into your system, stole your data, and they say, "Hey, we're going to leak this data if you don't, pay us money," or any other fact pattern around the fact.
Hmm.
we're going to do something if you don't pay us money,
If you
right?
don't pay.
That's
Yep.
technically extortion. Usually your coverage is going to respond to fraud. So whether there's identity fraud or whether there's fraudulent transfers, unauthorized fraud. So that's going to look like a lot of different scenarios, whether it's what ultimately ends up being a business email compromise where somebody comes in, gets into your mailbox, then looks at some of your conversations, hijacks those conversations, and gets your vendors or clients to pay them instead of you. You have some coverage that will help deal with some of potentially some of those funds. Also deal with any other ramifications that come out of that, right? And of course, the coverage is also going to include the help, right?
Yeah.
Coverage for help. And that's going to be your DFIR shop, your digital forensics instant response, your investigative support. Very critical. How do you help things in the future if you don't know how the incident occurred? On top of that, how do you answer regulators and how do you answer your clients? The questions they're going to have about the security of their data or what have you done since, yeah, so on and so forth, if you don't know some things about it itself. So it's not to say you're going to have all the answers. That's another thing too. The reality is that bad guys often wipe their footsteps, or the reality is systems are what they are prior to a forensic shop getting involved. And therefore, your configuration may not retain a ton of data. So all these things tie into each other. And so I think your policy will cover a lot of the support that you need. And ideally, the takeaway from that is if you know your coverage and you're properly and adequately covered, then you should first go consult the folks who do this every day and it's their bread and butter to help people like you, a small business that's now in need of help because of a cyber incident. Go talk to those folks right away. Sometimes that can be legal counsel, that can be management. All these things are usually available. And some of them will make more sense than others depending on the type of incident.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. But thinking about, this episode is going to air during Cyber Awareness or Cybersecurity Awareness Month, excuse me. So what is one thing that you would say, like one key thing that agents should do maybe during Cyber Security Awareness Month to educate their small business clients? What's like maybe one big piece that they can do?
Prepare in advance of that education. So come to the table ready, but come to the table with empathy.
Okay.
Remember that your clients are, again, they're not technical people, they're not cyber people, right? Who knows? Maybe you got like 20 people in your book who are IT companies or something of that sort, right? But with the exception of that, they don't know this. This is not their world. So show up to them with information about coverages, what's covered, the risks, and what are the risks out there that are something that everyone faces. And if you have the time or the ability to bring industry specific, even better. But
Hmm.
bring it with empathy. And that also requires to talk to them at their level. Don't
Sure.
come to them with super technical jargon and all this other stuff and flashy stuff. Just be honest and real with them. That's what small business owners want. They want some
Hmm.
empathy. They want they want, things to be kept real. They want to hear what the true risks are, what they look like, what they
Yeah.
can do about it.
100%. I would love for our audience to take away is leading with that empathy and understanding because it truly can feel almost overwhelming, I would say, to some small business owners to even think about like all of the things that their businesses are exposed to. So really leading with that understanding. But this has been great. Thank you again for joining the podcast, Eder. This has been a really great conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ashley. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate the time and look forward to seeing it and keep doing the work that we do with Coterie. Thank you.